Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Samaan. Wonderful being back with you once again. Today we're talking about neuroplasticity of the brain, how it affects anxiety. There's so many things they're learning. I remember once I went to a workshop on the brain. I guess it was, this was over like 10 years ago in Florida. It was the University of Florida Brain Institute. The director of the Brain Institute was speaking at the workshop, and wow, I learned so many things. But an interesting thing he said was that with the new technology, and remember this was a while back, every day when he's traveling, he has to call in to his office to find out what did they discover the day before. They're finding so many new things so quickly. And he said years ago it would be, maybe, once a month, and then it sped up to, about every other week. Something new was discovered, and every week. Now it's every day. So it's just amazing. Well, we're learning more about anxiety. The researchers are learning more, passing it on to us, and we're passing it on to you. As a Christian counselor, I approach counseling from a faith-based perspective. And so when I talk about God, when I talk about spiritual things, how they relate to our thinking, our relationships, our life, if that's offensive to you, if you're not a believer in God, that's okay. Put it aside. Take the truths of whatever might be said, and if you can use it to help you, that's what this is all about, to help you, or to help a friend or a family member. Well, anxiety, panic attacks, and agoraphobia have been the subject, and eventually we're going to go on to a new subject, but we're getting towards the end where we're talking a little more about these things that you don't hear much about, and for some it may be not very interesting because it's getting into some details that perhaps most people aren't interested in. But later on, when you start putting the pieces together, especially if you have anxiety, panic attack, agoraphobia, understanding the dynamics of what's going on in your mind and in your body, and spiritually, because we're addressing spirit, soul, and body in Christian counseling, not just one part, but all three parts, as well as the environment that you're in. When we're addressing all of that, it's good to pay attention to some of those details because it distracts you from what's going on, the chaos, the stress on the inside. And that distraction helps a great deal. Well, as we move on about this subject, we spoke last time about Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 to 8. And I'm just going to take a moment and read that once again. There's many places in the Bible that talk about how we can help ourselves by doing those things that God recommends. We don't have to do them. He doesn't force us to do anything. We have that free will to make our own choices. But he says, if you do this, it's going to be helpful. And if we do it, it turns out to be helpful. If we don't, okay, then maybe we'll grab something else in there that's helpful for us. But the truth is, the reality is doing good, thinking good, changes our brain. It feeds our brain. It makes it better. And if we don't, as we spoke of last time, that bad protein gets produced, killing brain cells, damaging them, shriveling them up, and the neurons along with them. The brain gets worse instead of better. We're dealing with inflammation of the limbic system, in my opinion, over 30 years of counseling. with the studies and all that, the people that I've seen with anxiety disorders over that period of time, and other disorders as well. I used to work in a psychiatric unit as a therapist at that time, many years ago. All kinds of problems, disorders that I worked with. Putting all that together and being able to see, yeah, there is that inflammation that they're talking about in the fear and emotion center of the brain. The word inflammation sometimes throws you. Another word might be irritation. It gets irritated in there. And when that happens, it's difficult for the amygdala, that fight or flight center that we have spoken of in the past, to cycle down. Once it gets stimulated due to that inflammation, irritation in that part of the brain, it's hard to de-escalate things, and sometimes it takes a little while. Simple little things can trigger a big reaction. That doesn't happen to everybody because they don't have that sensitivity in that part of the brain. And so when we read Scripture as believers in God, believers in Jesus, we're applying it to our lives, and we find that when we do, it works. And this is a typical scripture. However, it's kind of packed in there with some important thoughts, important words. And I break this down further. I'll be doing a PDF on this. It's pretty much done. I'm just kind of editing it, finalizing it, and I'll have that available on my website within the next week or so. And you can read it, download it if you like. Interesting stuff, but I broke down this scripture in such a way that you can read it whenever you're feeling irritated, upset, distracted, negative, cynical, just feeling sense of, I don't know, doom and gloom. Something, I woke up this morning and I felt, well, you know, thinking these good thoughts, reading them as you're speaking them, and it comes back in your ear. It's like a filter. You're speaking it and it comes back in. It makes it a little deeper. It puts it in deeper into your thoughts. And as we do that, the brain reacts in a positive way to positive words. That's the way God designed us, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So Philippians 4:4-8, and there's different versions of the Bible. I always encourage clients, read the easy versions. You can get into the King James and others if you want to do word studies and so on. But it just opens it up so much more when you're able to get the in-depth understanding of what it's saying when you have these additional meanings of the Greek words or the Hebrew words. It's kind of like, you know, for those of you familiar with German, those long words in German, and yet those long words have so many different meanings for a word. There's so much put into a word. The Bible is like that. And in fact, one day we're going to talk about Bible codes, and they're discovering secret things in the Bible that are coming out of the Bible codes. I just went off on a tangent. Philippians 4:4-8, rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. think about these things. If it's worthy of praise, in other words, if it's good, think about the good stuff. Why does the New Testament, especially Jesus, the Gospels, the epistles, why is there so much emphasis on good thinking, right thinking? Well, science is now discovering that, as I spoke of last time, the brain produces a healthy protein that feeds the brain, nurtures the brain thrives when we think good thoughts, when good things are happening around us. The God-made brain has neuroplasticity. It heals as we think those good thoughts. The forming of new brain connections is neuroplasticity. Neuroconnections, neurogeneration, it generates new things. When that happens, what we're doing is we're exercising the brain. As I'm getting older, I realize the brain gets rusty. And if I don't keep exercising it, reading, talking, studying, I get rusty. Even when you're young, if you don't keep exercising that brain, it gets a little harder to pull up stuff. And you know, just like anything else, you start creaking up there and things start to drop off. That's not good. So we keep thinking those things. Over the years, I've always been very surprised talking with pastors that are 80, 90 years old at how alert they are and how much they're doing. And, you know, certainly there are those with limitations, but there's something to that. They keep their minds exercised. They keep reading, they keep studying, they keep talking to people, they keep encouraging and so on. It helps them to thrive. That helps them to stay healthier in general, but it helps their minds as well. And all of us should be doing that. So the brain will adapt if exercised. It's possible for an adult's brain to form new connections and pathways that changes the wiring circuit. In many cases, improves it if you keep thinking good thoughts. The reverse is true as well. If you keep thinking negative thoughts, cynical thoughts, thoughts of doom and gloom or paranoia or whatever else that's not good, it's not going to thrive. The brain is not going to thrive. It's going to actually shrink, the studies tell us. I don't want my brain to shrink. I don't know about you. But when you have anxiety, the tendency is to focus on negative things, especially while you're having an anxiety attack or panic attack, or you're in the midst of agoraphobia, which you're secluded, you're staying at home, you're not going anywhere because of the fear of panic disorder, panic attack, very uncomfortable. The tendency is when that limbic system starts gearing up like that, it's going to think negatively. It's the fight or flight response center. And you're going to pay attention to those negative things because those negative things are threatening. So you think more about them. But that's not good for the brain. And so you have to force yourself. It's not easy when you have anxiety to think good thoughts. So it's exercising, it's forcing yourself to think those good thoughts. Whatever you can get to study or read that have good things in them, well, read it, study it, Be around people who talk in a positive way, who are encouraging and supportive. Kind of push away those people who are the opposite, because they're not doing you good and they're not doing themselves good. Sometimes you have to be around them, but you don't have to take part in their negativity or their doom and gloom thinking. In fact, you can encourage them otherwise by thinking some good thoughts and throwing that in there in the midst of their negativity in hopes that that might catch on a little bit for them. Well, the ability of the brain goes further by its capacity to grow those new neurons, and we spoke about that last time, and what the studies are revealing. Christopher Berglund said this. He's a brain researcher. One could speculate that this process opens up the possibility to reinvent yourself and move away from the status quo, or to overcome post-traumatic events that evoke anxiety and stress. Hardwired, fear-based memories often lead to avoidance behaviors that can hold you back from living your life to the fullest. And he's talking about the importance of thinking those good thoughts, because the neuroplasticity of the brain, the fact that the brain changes as we think and do, we're either changing the brain for the good or for the worst. Never stop learning. The minute you stop learning, things start going south. We create connections between those neurons, those dendrites, those parts of the brain that grow, and we learn new things, stimulates those things that are old in the brain, so to speak. New circumstances changes brain circuitry. This happens daily. If you have anxiety, if you have depression, if you have something else, stimulation in a positive way would be learning new things. And we're going to talk about 10 things that you can do that are common to help that learning new things, to help the brain in growing and being healthy, as you encourage and stimulate the brain cells, the neurons, the pathways, the parts of the brain to think good, to connect well. You're going to be better. It's not a promise that it's going to erase something. It's a promise that if you stay consistent in doing these things, you're going to be better. For some, the bad's going to go away. For others, the bad is going to decrease in severity. For others, there'll be a change of that's noticeable, and they have to keep working on it for a while longer. Some it's quick, some it takes a while. But for most people, I've noticed, they seem to get better more quickly if they're working consistently on thinking those good thoughts. And that's why we get together, or we go to groups. If you're an alcoholic, drug addict in recovery, you go to your groups. You attend support groups, or at church you go to home groups, or fellowship groups, or activities together, and those activities are positive. They're stimulating in a positive way. Well, if you do that consistently, good things happen. In fact, research shows that regular churchgoers, and it's not the church, it's the good thinking that goes on there. You got hypocrites everywhere. You got hypocrites in the church too. You don't look at the bad ones, you look at the good ones. There's always good ones everywhere you go. So you look at those people that are doing right, and you are being around them it spills over onto you. You feel good when you're around them. Don't you feel good when you go to church and you walk out, you feel so much better than before you went in? It's like something was lifted off your shoulders. And that might last 2 or 3 days. And so they have a midweek service or a home group meeting to kick that back into gear again, to lift those things up. And then you're good for a while, for the rest of the week possibly, until church again. It's not the church. It's those good words, those good thoughts, that good fellowship that comes from it, encourages and stimulates the brain cells, the neurons, the protein, that good protein we spoke of, to grow. We can encourage and stimulate new connections by thinking, speaking, and behaving in the manner God architecturally designed our brains in His image. Now, you might not believe that if you're not a Christian or a believer in God. I believe it. And I look at that and I realize everything that He said has come true up to our day and time. So He's not a liar. He must be real because there's proof of those promises that have all come true, thousands of them. Okay, then He made us in His image. He put within us that ability to heal. It's not that you can heal instantly. It's not that you can just heal by your own might, but in combination with God thinking, in combination with His Spirit, with His help, in combination with whatever else that's good, we can get better faster in many ways. Here's 10 examples of that. Just simple everyday examples of how neuroplasticity, that is the changing of the circuitry in the brain, works. And the first is, believe it or not, intermittent fasting. And those of you that, most people have never fasted before, and some people are, oh, is that any good or whatever. And then you got people who fast regular basis, periodically, intermittently. And you have those that do it too much, and that's not good either. But what they found in research is intermittent fasting increases the synaptic adaptation. That is, it increases the brain neurons to be stimulated and to stretch out and to connect, the dendrites to connect. It promotes neuron growth. It improves your thinking. Believe it. You can believe that, I think, because when you fast for 2 or 3 days, you get over that initial thing, your mind's more alert, isn't it? If anyone has done that, you recognize, yeah, my mind's more alert. I'm thinking more clearly. And you wish you could think that way all the time. And of course, it's not good to fast all the time. And there's different kinds of fasts. There's some people that might just fast not eating meat, or fast not eating carbohydrates, or fast in some other way. But if you do it intermittently, periodically during times, you notice that, wow, I'm thinking more clearly. So it decreases the risk of neurodegenerative disease. That's what the researchers say. And you know what else it does? It helps you to remember more easy. You remember more easily. Traveling is another one. Exposes the brain to novel stimuli and exposes the brain to new things. New things are good. Some people are afraid of new things. If there's a fear of the unknown, they don't like anything new. And in church, we see that a lot, where new pastor comes in and you have a certain group in the church who doesn't want any change at all. And they get so upset when the pastor wants to move the podium or make a schedule change. And he's got to do it very slowly, to help those people adapt. And their minds are adapting as he does those things very slowly. So here's this principle working in that way in helping others to make adjustments who have that fear of the unknown. And for some, it's a chronic fear that actually produces the anxiousness inside. And to prevent that, they panic and they threaten. They attack with words and sometimes actions. So traveling exposes you to new stimuli. And that's why it's good when you have little children. Take them places. Go do new things periodically. You don't have to do something new every day, but if once a week you could do something new, great. A little trip is very stimulating for a child. They're seeing these new things and their mind is getting stimulated, opening up new pathways and activity in the brain. That's a good thing, even for us adults. Whenever, I don't travel that much anymore because I have a very bad back and I just as soon just not take the long trips because of the discomfort that comes from it. I think God is keeping me at home base most of the time to keep working. Sometimes I think of it that way. It's for your good, certainly, because it makes me study more. But when I used to travel quite a bit, Linda and I would travel, you see new things and, you just felt stimulated. And I'm sure you felt that way as well. Using mnemonic devices. I had to look up that word. I thought, why do they use those words? I remember in college, academically, they would use the academic words, and I would think, well, people aren't going to understand these words, and so I made it a goal to break down those academic words as much as I could to be able to pass things along to people in a way they could understand, because the only ones who understands those academic words are academic people, and most of the time those academic words are for the purpose of, look how smart I am. Look how much I know. It's for selfish reasons. It's to say, look how intelligent and how much I'm able to speak these academic words. What's the purpose? It's not helping most people who are in college, graduate school. They study, they have to know those words, they have to interpret them. When they get out, those words start going away, and they start speaking more normal so everyone can understand them. So pneumatic devices is stimulating. A pneumatic device, basically, it's not a machine, it's everyday things. For example, you remember what your mom or dad taught you on how to know how many days, total days in a month. You count them by the knuckles. January is the knuckle. That's 31 days. So every knuckle represents 31 days. And when there's not a knuckle, so January, February might be 28 days. March, 31 days. April, 30 days. All the way to December, and then you start over again for January. That's how we remember. December is 31, January is 31. That's a pneumatic device. My wife's good at that. She comes up with these things, and I go, I never thought of that. And she remembers things. She has a genius IQ. It goes over my head when she's speaking sometimes, and I have to ask questions, and what do you mean by that? She knows what she meant, and I have to bring it down to my level. But that's what she can do. She can come up with these things to put them together. It helps her memory to remember things that most of us wouldn't remember without reminders. So as we get older, we need some of that help with pneumatic devices. Learning a musical instrument, believe it or not, it increases those pathways in the brain, the neuroplasticity. It improves your circuitry and wiring. I'm not a musical person, never was, I always wished I could play an instrument of some sort. I used to play a harmonica many years ago. I enjoyed doing that, and that kind of went off to the side after a while. When I started cutting my hair and be normal, harmonica went away. So that music increases the connectivity between brain regions and helps that neural network to improve. Oftentimes you see these, many times you see doctors, surgeons, and other groups. They not only are intelligent or experts in their field, and they have other hobbies, but many of them, they play musical instruments, or they sing in the choir, or whatever it might be. They know it's stimulating. They know it's good for their brains. Non-dominant hand exercises. We can all do that, can't we? I'm right-handed. My dad was ambidextrous. He could use both hands. You know, he thought right to left that way. And I always watched him, and I would think, okay, now, how can I can learn that. You know, I didn't learn it. He just had a talent for that. His wiring allowed him to do that. Our wiring is going to be dominant. Now, I'm right-handed. That means you're left brain dominant. Do this. Cross your arms. Is it comfortable? Okay, which arm is over the other? My left arm is over my right. The left side of your body is controlled by the right side of your hemisphere. If I switch, that's uncomfortable. That's not right. Yeah. Oh, this is much better. Yeah. What this is telling us is sometimes we need to do that to help improve the circuitry and wiring. Sometimes we need to play around with writing with the opposite hand because it increases that connectivity of the neurons. Sometimes you need to hit a baseball from the opposite side or use the other hand to catch one. Reading fiction. I never thought that would be helpful. And yet research is proving that when you're reading fiction, you're activating more of the brain. It increases and enhances the brain, the connectivity, the neuroplasticity. And it's true as well, reading nonfiction can stimulate your imagination if you think on what you're reading rather than just read it. That's why reading fiction stimulates, it pushes those pathways to stretch out and connect. And we're going to see what it looks like when, some of what it looks like when that happens. So when we read the Bible, as an example, we're reading those good words, those good thoughts in there. It's stimulating because it causes us to think and dwell and pray. All of that stimulates that neuroplasticity. Expanding your vocabulary. My wife, genius mind, loves doing those puzzles. It stimulates her vocabulary, and that stimulates the neural connections in the brain, activates visual and auditory processes, as well as the memory processes, so it improves memory. Creating artwork, even doodling, stimulates. But creating artwork, it's forcing you to be more imaginative. It's forcing you to send those good messages throughout the brain, send the protein, that healthy protein, which is being produced by that enzyme that we spoke of last time, that helps the healthy protein to be produced that nourishes brain cells and neurons. And it turns into white matter, produces white cells turning into white matter in the brain, saturating the cells with nutrients that are good. So creating artwork can boost insight, introspection, thinking about self, thinking about what's going on more and on the inside. It increases memory, empathy. A lot of people have trouble with empathy. That's understanding someone else, understanding others' needs. Doing art enhances that, believe it or not. Well, attention. It improves your attention, doing artwork, and focus. So crafts are a good thing. And remember when you used to do crafts in school when you were young? And then kind of dropped off after a while. Or if you had a mom that loved doing crafts, and so you'd do crafts at home and so on. Well, there's something good about that. It helps in all these good areas of neuroplasticity in the brain, helping you to think better, helping to keep your brain from getting rusty. Dancing, oh my, so many churches, no dancing. Well, I can understand why. You know, you don't want to encourage boy-girl interactions in those ways, but there's those that will allow dancing if there's no contact, and yet dancing stimulates, reduces the risk of Alzheimer's. They just learned that not that long ago. It increases those neural connectivities. So you get more folks you're seeing joining dancing studios, learning to dance. It's great exercise, but for the brain, great exercise also. Sleeping is not great exercise, but you know what? It's great exercise for the brain. It encourages learning retention. There's a dendritic episode that occurs when you're sleeping. They call it the dendritic spine. You have your axon, which is your nerve cell in the brain. You have the cell itself, and you have the dendrites that stick out, and the synaptic gap, and they send the chemical, it's an electrical message, changes to a chemical message here. The chemical goes over, is received on the other dendrite, converts it back to electrical, and off it goes. And this is going on millions and millions of times a second. When this occurs, connection increases, but it's even enhanced more that on the sides of these dendrites, there are little things that poke out. Those little things that poke out are called dendritic spine. And here's what it looks like. This is a picture that I took off of Wikipedia, and just kind of helping to get an impression so you can tell the original when you're looking at a dendrite. So that yellow stem that's there, that's this part, that's the dendrite sticking out, and the axon, that's this part where the electrical message is flowing. And these little lumps here are dendritic spine portions that are sticking out and making connections, and the synaptic gap is what's in between the dendrites. Well, look at this here, new experience in learning. You start to learn something new. Here's something sticking out. That's a dendritic spine sticking out of the dendrite, connecting to another axon or another circuitry. And in the connection, prolonged experience and training. So you keep trying to memorize something. The longer you keep trying to memorize it, the more easy it becomes, because we can see in this picture how that dendritic spine is becoming stronger and bigger, and the connection is becoming stronger. Now you're able to have easier time. Now you're remembering, you're memorizing something, it's working, or you're having a new experience and it's stimulating. You take that away. Well, the connection may remain, but you can see it's weaker now. It's not as strong. It's fading out, and the longer you keep away from that new stimulation, eventually it'll detach. Unless you repeat it and relearn it. And we see that last picture, it just grows back, it gets stronger again. So once you memorize something, or once you have a new experience, and you continue having that new experience or other new experiences, it reinforces that in the brain. It reinforces the connectivity. That reinforces memory. It reinforces problem-solving thoughts, cognitions that are going on. All of that is good. So with anxiety or depression or other issues, all of these things will help you to feel better and get through the difficulties that you're having with anxiety or depression or bipolar or whatever else it might be. It's good. Think those good thoughts. That helps you to be good. And in being good, there's a cycle. Think, feel, do. The next event, if you're thinking, feeling, and doing in a good way, the next event is more likely to be good. Continuing that cycle, helping you to continue that cycle. If you think negatively, if it's a bad event and you think negatively about it, you're thinking bad thoughts and so on, what's going to happen? The emotions, the feelings are going to be negative. They're going to be upsetting. The next thing is behavior. What's going to happen then? Negative behavior. Then what's going to occur to the next event? That negative behavior is more likely going to cause a negative event to occur next. Now you got a cycle, thinking negatively, doing negatively. And once that starts spinning, that's hard to slow it down, and bad things come out of it usually. Think, feel, do good thoughts, good actions. Life gets a whole lot better. All of us have bad things happen, but we go through them better when we stay in that cycle of thinking, feeling, and doing. I hope this was helpful for you today. God bless you.